Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hiring Success Show. I'm your host, James Mackey. Really exciting episode for you today. We're going to be talking about how AI is going to influence everything from recruitment to people, HR, the entire employee lifecycle. So our goal is to get a little deeper. I think everybody here knows that AI is going to impact efficiency. Like, we get it, right? And it's become kind of buzzy. So we want to dive a little bit deeper into specifically how it's going to impact recruiting and people, organizations, and the employee experience, and really start to try to uncover like where it should be used. Like sometimes in the pursuit of efficiency, we can lose some of the human element. So I think specifically for talent acquisition and HR, we have to be mindful of that. And we don't want to lose that human connection or something that really pulls together, or like, the essence of humanity, which might sound a little bit dramatic, right? But that's the reality of what was happening with AI right now. It's like, how do we maintain our humanity, our relationships? And so how do we balance that with the need for efficiency in business and to stay competitive? So that's what we're going to be diving in today. We have one of my friends on the show, Jason Radisson. Jason, this is our podcast number 2. It's great to have you back and to hit record again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, James. Really excited for the topic today and to be on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm thrilled, and thank you for contributing and being part of our community. So, Jason, before we go into everything, I want you to share your background through the lens of like what you do, so people understand when you share your advice or your insights. It's like, I want people to understand your perspective, right? Like where you're coming from.
Yeah, 100%. So, I've been working in technology. My name is Jason Radisson. I've been working in technology for a long time. My current startup is a company called Movo, and we are an all-in-one AI-powered solution for high-volume HR. I've been working, I would say in algorithmic approaches to business for a long time, and that sounds a little general, but some of the systems that I built have been deployed into some really large businesses. I ran a number of algorithms teams at eBay in a redesign and sort of changing direction in the homepage and getting the product itself to be a lot more algorithmic. I built some really large systems in the travel and hospitality space, around yield management and pricing and different things. And I worked in the gig economy, and I've been working in the gig economy probably for about the last 8 or 9 years now, at Uber, at 99 Taxis, at Rappi, in various ways and form, putting algorithmic processes into the world. And a lot of what we talk about, those of us who are sort of scaling technology businesses, is essentially we're using AI underneath the teams and as an extension of the team to quickly build a business. When you launch in Uber City and you ramp up in Uber City, you're hiring 5,000, 10,000 people a week. You're doing that in a 99, 98% automated way. And to a large extent, I think that's sort of what is coming next in HR, and kind of what James and I have been, riffing on. And some of the ideas swirling in the industry are sort of what happens next. You have these incredibly powerful systems for a lot of people who are out there day to day working in HR. They haven't really impacted their job that much. You have a little bit of automation maybe that's coming in through your ATS, but you really haven't, had to deal with kind of a wholesale automation in the way that some of the gig economy and some of the e-commerce platforms have. So maybe that is a little bit of background.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So I think there's a lot of different places we can start. Now, your company, and I think it's relevant to this conversation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your company does, because it's relevant in that it's a product for HR teams. So love to hear a little bit about your company. Sure. and how you're thinking about AI specifically, like some real applicable insight into how that's guiding your product roadmap.
Yeah, totally. So Movo is a company formerly known as Shift One. We've rebranded recently. Throughout the pandemic, we were essentially hiring automation team, and we would jump into sort of the most imbalanced hiring markets in the country, high volume in things like light industrial manufacturing, logistics, call center work, clean tech, a little bit of healthcare, all of the things that were sort of completely imbalanced, and we would jump in and we would help companies to hire really quickly a ton of people. So if there were hundreds of people, some of our clients were even thousands of people behind, we would jump in and help them. The platform that we built to do that was, as you can guess, largely automated, fairly intelligent system, a lot of brute force, and a lot of just building a really nice product that workers wanted to use and applicants wanted to use, so that you could truly have self-service. And so, a big part of the hiring process we designed was a worker, an applicant, self-serving, kind of getting the app, putting in a little bit of information, and basically having the system then hire them, running their background checks, validating their medical licensing, any of their immigration statuses and whatnot that we needed along the way, with the Verify system and some of the other things, to make sure that the hire was a good one, at least from a compliance perspective. And then working with our clients to kind of design the ideal kind of high volume onboarding once we had sort of their applicant pipeline going again, and once we had all of these kind of pre-hired people that we were landing into their companies. I use a little bit of past tense here because the hiring market isn't as crazy as it was even 12, 15 months ago. The platform itself, so we've branched out, and another big area that we're covering is everything related to scheduling. And a big part of, I think, what everybody's trying to do, HR industry, but also, sort of the internal clients that we serve, we're all trying to make do with more from less resources. So a big second problem that we went to solve was, how do we automate and optimize the schedule and the deployment of labor? And people call it different names. Some big companies refer to it as sort of internal talent marketplace. They may mean moving execs around, but most likely they mean moving frontline workers between kind of different stores, different centers, different hospitals, to kind of load balance and do that internal load balancing. And that's the second kind of big application for AI inside of Movo, is that scheduling optimization piece. And then keeping track of everything, making sure that the worker that we're recommending take a slot is the right qualification set, making sure that all of the timekeeping that we may need to do and any of the back office work to kind of button everything up, that's all done as automatically as we possibly can. So that's the platform we built, and it's a couple of big AIs really at the heart of it. And as we look at sort of the broader industry, you can kind of see the application in multiple spots of AI similar to us. If it's not our company's AIs, it's going to be other companies' AIs. But definitely a lot of opportunity out there for win-win situations in HR.
So I guess one of the questions that I have, and this is more of like a high level question, is, and I'm really happy that you also have like more of a technical background, because I think this is going to be really valuable. I don't think a lot of people understand what I'm about to ask, like nor do I, right? Like I don't understand the answer to this, but when it comes to these AI products that are being built and AI functionality, when you look at like the future of artificial intelligence, do you think that a lot of software companies are going to have their own like in-house AI products, or do you feel like AI is ultimately going to be licensed from a couple of big providers that have seemed to like figured it out? Because it's what's I find like really interesting. It's like all these startups are kind of developing their own tools, but I'm wondering like if that's what the future looks like, or there's going to be like open AI that basically like leases out this technology to everyone.
Totally. Like I think if you talk about foundational models and in things like predictive text, right, which is sort of where we are with OpenAI and everything that's happening, or Facebook's Llama and some of the other models that are out there, not just ChatGPT, but basically where that's headed is it takes several $1 million to build a model that then generally is able to predict text in so many ways, right? It can write software code, it can write legal contracts, it can write marketing copy, it can design your interviews for you. It can even, essentially evaluate your candidates' responses. It can do so many things. So there's kind of a general intelligence that I think it's going to be hard. Sort of any team with a couple $1 million is going to be able to start to build kind of foundational models. I think what we're going to get is there's going to be a whole set of companies on top of those foundational models. And I think the tendency is probably going to be open source. And then, we'll be in this space where most developers are going to want to build on top of open source. They're not going to want to build on top of one of the, FANG big tech companies models. They'll want to build on something that seems more robust and more commercially open. I think we're gonna have that. As far as generative text is concerned, I think where it's going to get interesting, if we talk about sort of specific HR applications and operations applications inside of companies is, it's going to be possible to get a long way on your company's own data if you're a large company. And certainly if you're the size of Amazon, you can build kind of your own foundational HR models. And we'll want to get into places like, some of the places that we're going with Movo, which is like being able to predict ideal deployments of workers, being able to predict ideal career pathing, things that a general text model isn't going to have. It doesn't have access to personnel records and things like that. So there's going to be an industry-specific set of foundational models or a functionally specific set of foundational models that won't have anything to do with ChatGPT or Llama or one of these other big models.
So it's like maybe like two applications, and this is just like from a 6-year-old perspective, me trying to understand, right? Like when it's the data and privacy element, that could be one thing where something is built in-house. And then also like very specific, like nuance, operation, process driven functionality is not something that open source can.
Exactly. Right? You might open source interview questions, right? Or build essentially, and you don't have to build anything. You could go to ChatGPT today and probably get a really good set of interview questions for, I don't know, pick, Java, Python, or whatever, standard interviews you might want to be running. But it's more like career pathing, performance management. I think we're embarking on this kind of brave new future where we're going to get a lot of support from AI internally as HR professionals, as operations professionals. Because we'll be able to benefit from so much better information, right? And this is where I think a little bit of the internal, let's call it the healthy tension between the human-based approach and the AI-based approach is going to sort of come up, because people are working and have been working largely off of intuition. If we think about how we run performance reviews, if we think about how we make promotion decisions, even to some extent, hiring panels, hiring committees, those are really based on the combined experience of the people that are involved in the process. It's, to state the obvious, an AI that's trained on 10 different companies, career progressions, or the entire nursing industry can make a lot better decisions and has a lot more balanced perspective, a lot more scientific and data-driven perspective than the human intelligence in the room. There's just no way that a group of humans has sort of immediate access to maybe 1 million professionals worth of data or 1 million career paths worth of data. So I think that's the interesting piece. And as said, like that's not going to be open sourced. Those are going to be developments that happen inside of the industries. And I think that's the next wave. That's what comes next after the ERP and the cloud HR guys. What's going to replace Oracle, what's going to replace Workday is going to be those foundational models. And there'll be companies like Movo that are helping to kind of put that kind of superhuman intelligence into some processes. And, that's, I think, what we all owe the world is to do that in a very balanced, just, equitable way, and avoid any of the pitfalls and any of the biases that could potentially sneak into the models. Now, I think what we've seen too on that topic is just, we've seen, like, we all, kind of remember Katana and some of these, some of the stranger things that happen in generative AI. And I think a lot of those are coming up because, frankly, those big models are trained on the entire internet. And,
Right.
There's a lot of crazy stuff on the entire internet. I think a big part of it too is just making sure that we're putting kind of good data in, that we've got, good data from good companies and, fundamentally robust processes that we're training the AIs on, so that, we end up with avoiding some of those pitfalls of some of the biases we've seen in other models.
Right. And I think it's this is any type of AI or kind of automation, if you will, faces this resistance where, like, I think the analogy we discussed on our prep call was like self-driving cars.
Mhm.
Like, a self-driving car crashes and, there's a fatality, right? It's people kind of freak out and there's this backlash of regulation, which I think regulation is important, particularly at how quickly things are advancing. Don't get me wrong, but like when you look statistically, if self-driving cars are going to crash less, then we have to be willing to kind of relinquish that control a little bit, because in aggregate, potentially we could save more lives. And so not only just from a logical decision, but from like a moral perspective as well, it makes sense to move forward with the option that uh, proves to be puts more good out into the world than bad, in a
Yeah.
sense, right? So it's that's interesting. And I think that in a sense correlates to bias in hiring systems. It's not going to completely eliminate bias, probably, at least for a long time. However, if we can train the systems to produce less bias, then we want to look at it relatively
Yeah.
to human decision making. And I think that
Yeah.
that's important, like not to look at it as a baseline in its own kind of silo or out on an island. We have to look at it relative to human behavior when it comes to AI and automation. And so um,
Yeah.
I think that's
100%.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely agree. And I think our roles all change. We're speaking of this a little bit, still a little bit as if it's far in the future. And I think, for a lot of us, our roles are already changing. I mean, I find myself anything longer writing wise, I'm editing. I'm editing more than I'm writing. I'm sort of working with writing AIs, as I think all of us are these days, at least in the tech industry, because it kind of doubles your productivity. And I think, for the role of the recruiter who's sort of looking at, his or her daily process, why wouldn't you, if you could get a perfect job description or nearly perfect job description in like 3 seconds, why wouldn't you do that? If you could get nearly perfect interview questions in like 3 seconds, why wouldn't you do that? So I think there is this transitional period where we're very much editing, and we're sort of, using these as these superhuman enhancements to our jobs, but we're just around the corner from a lot of these processes just not needing us anymore.
Yeah.
And then we are editors of the overall process. And that's why I say, as scary as that may seem, or as, science fiction-y as that may seem to a lot of people in a lot of, areas, particularly in traditional industries, in tech, we've had it for a while. And I'd say the industry I always point to is the gig economy. That's really where our driver coordinators in a big city, New York City, Los Angeles, London, if you take those cities, there's one or two guys, gals, basically managing a fleet of 50,000 drivers in real time. And it's not manual. We're not picking up the phone.
Right.
We're deploying, we're sort of backing a bunch of AIs that are managing pricing, managing dispatching, managing communications, managing all of those things all in real time. And we're sort of the human role as you turn the dials. So I think that's a little bit of, that's fast forward for a lot of industries. That's not going to be the reality in a year. That'll be the reality in 5 years. But that, I think, is essentially where a lot of it is going.
Well, so this is, and I don't know if this is like a more technical question, but curious to get your thoughts on it. Like, I would be assuming like there's a way to kind of combine like machine learning functionality with like natural linguistic processing
Mhm.
to create like to even create like a more robust tool where it's like
Yeah.
any type of like outreach, it's like it constantly essentially A/B testing, refining language, spitting out like learning from uh its own experience essentially to, or I don't know if experience would be the right word, but
Yeah. Yeah.
learning from experience in some regard,
Yeah.
and then using that to like optimize its linguistic like programming. Do you see like a lot of do you see tools kind of heading in that direction where it's leveraging like both of those aspects?
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think, and some of the systems we've been talking about, if you look at the gig economy, we reduced a lot of the problems to math. And then when you're talking about a math problem, it's been, the domain of computers for the last, 20 years in computer science. They've been really good at mathematical algorithms and being able to automate and kind of give superhuman intelligence on a lot of these processes. And I think you're spot on. What's so different now that we have this kind of generative text capability is basically the optimization problems are anything that you can do text with. And that's basically software. So we're entering the realm where computers can optimize themselves and they can write new software for themselves. And if you've looked at the Auto GPT project and played around, certainly some of the listeners have had the opportunity. It's been a pretty broad project out there. That project is all about essentially sending out smart agents to go and do your work for you. And they do things like they write scrapers that then go and compare flight prices and travel times and then summarize it in using Python and Excel files that you can go and compare your travel offering. Like people have written, essentially a travel agent program and things like that. And that's I think also a big part of what's coming to corporate is, you're going to have a process and, it could just be like, I want to advertise my jobs on job boards, which is a task that a lot of recruiters do. And we'll be able to write smart agents to go and do that and continually optimize themselves. And that's a future that we're probably at most a year away from because, some of these open source projects, you can do that right now. So, give kind of the startup industry, the tech ecosystem like a year to put it into some more user-friendly products, but that's right around the corner. A lot of those kind of standard white collar managing a process, designing a process, managing a process, tweaking and optimizing a process. If it's, if a human can write the commands to do it, pretty soon we're going to have these smart agents that'll do it for us.
Mhm.
It's really exciting. It is definitely going to be disruptive for a lot of folks.
Right. I mean, I think like the World Economic Forum put out a report recently saying that like 23% of jobs are going to be disrupted over the next 5 years. And I honestly am wondering if that's like lower
Yeah.
than it's actually going to
Right.
be. Like that
Right.
almost sounds like, I feel like this
Pretty
is going
conservative.
to,
Right? Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
like pretty much every job is going to be disrupted.
Yeah.
Like in any industry that's like prevalent, like important, like
Right,
it's
right.
going to impact, even if it's not directly like at your company, other companies somewhere in the ecosystem or up and down that are somehow correlated to what you're doing are going to
Yep.
be impacted, and that's going to impact the economics of your business, the structure of your business. Like I just don't see any real like substantial type of industry not being significantly impacted. I think you're right. It's like the moves to make implementation are also happening so fast, it seems. Like this
Yeah.
isn't something where it's like, okay, a new technology is coming out and then 10 years later we see it in enterprise application. Like companies
Right.
are moving
Right.
a lot faster, even big companies, right? Like are moving pretty quickly on this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
if you look at Microsoft's speed of product releases lately, and I think there are a number of sort of it's gonna I think give more strength and credence to big companies. I think it's going to benefit big companies more than it's going to benefit small companies, with some exceptions. Just because big companies are going to be able to be a lot more nimble. They're going to be able to have less personnel, and those personnel can be deploying thousands of smart agents to help them with their jobs. And just, I think a lot of the things that have slowed down big companies in terms of sort of internal alignment and some of the usual things,
mm,
I think you're going to be able to have bots handling a lot of those interactions, replacing a lot of the corporate meetings and otherwise. And
that
then you just have
that's
more
actually really
capital
interesting.
and more leverage in a big company. So I think it's going to be interesting to see big companies get more nimble.
That's a really interesting point that I actually haven't heard before. So just to like to slow down on that, it's like you're right.
Yeah,
Typically big companies are known for more inefficiencies, overhead, kind of more
right.
waste per se, like when it comes to just to overhead and like just efficiency of and changing things, right? Like a much slower process to change. And so you're right, like I could see this really accelerating their rate of
Yeah,
change. And that's like almost where I feel like in the past startups were considered more nimble, right? Because they're smaller, it's easy to kind of pivot and change. And if this accelerates big business's ability to pivot and change, it's going to
yeah,
like what do you like what impact do you think that would have on the startup ecosystem? Like if big companies
yeah. Well, I think the other thing is there's going to be a proliferation of startups because, and I'll make one very concrete example, and a little bit going on the tech side a little bit, but if you look at the role of the product manager, and you can Google this, there have been people have written a bunch of stuff about Chat GPT prompts for product management. And for those of you who have, either working in a tech company or been around product managers, or your spouse is a product manager, if you're not used to the day-to-day, a lot of product management is sort of taking the vision of what the feature is supposed to do or what the market needs for the product, and then breaking it down into engineering instructions so the team can go and build it. And you can literally, with Chat GPT, like a lot of things, we're talking about recruiting and sales, you can use Chat GPT to carve hours of work a day out of your schedule. Same thing there. You can literally write product requirement documents. You give the prompt and a few different commands, and it can come up with your product requirement documents. And as we know, it can also write fairly decent code. So, as said, I think like the implication in corporate life, a lot of corporate life in companies that have a lot of technology infrastructure and a lot of technical debt is like, you're always like, oh, I would love to do this feature, except that's going to impact 1,000 people in the company, and I don't know how I'm going to get all of that done. Well, if that's all automated and the change management is essentially automated, then the big company starts moving a lot quicker. In a small startup, if you don't have to go hire 100 engineers, but you can get 100 engineers worth of work done with 5 engineers, and maybe one kind of senior product designer who is able to handle kind of all of the product requirement working day. It's going to accelerate startups in that way. It's going to be the barrier to entry is going to be a lot lower for senior guys and gals out there. And the companies are going to be able to pick up the pace if they want to.
So the other thing is, so you're right, because in a sense it accelerates big companies, but it also will accelerate startups. So it's like the rate
Yeah,
of change will increase for both. So maybe like, is
exactly.
it gonna, but so you don't think it like changes the balance of
I
like
think it
power
still
in it?
changes the balance because, it's going to be the barrier to entry for a startup is going to be low. And there's gonna be a point in time, and I don't know if it's in 5 years, 7 years, 2 years, or whatever, where you're essentially going to be able to start a company with a couple of prompts. Because all that stuff's online, and it's all, all the back office of starting a company is, I think that stuff is there's already a bunch of cloud services that do that. It's just one step away from being able to do it,
Right.
automatically. And then, like I said, like product design, and sort of product implementation, there's a bunch of stuff in there that is going to be pretty quickly. So startups, the barrier to entry to a startup is having a good idea anymore, and then, being able to design the company and the product quickly.
Well, this is
Um,
like, I think this is going to dramatically impact startup community. I think too, it's
mhm,
like software code. I mean, as that
right.
becomes better through AI, it's going to lower the barrier to entry from that regard too. Like it's going to become a lot less expensive
Right.
to develop
Right.
software. And so like how that's going to dramatically change like the fundraising landscape as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And you'll be able to, in the way some people like experiment with buying domain names or, different things like that. Like you'll be able to experiment. I have 10 new startup ideas I want to try this month, and you'll be able to try them all. And the fundraising will be very different from that. It might be really minimal, at least from a development perspective.
Right.
But as I said, still think it favors big companies because at the end of the day, they have sort of the global movement of capital. It's one thing that a startup that isn't funded yet is able to quickly get traction and sort of start to build. It's another thing if a big company with, 30 million customers, 50 million customers, all of a sudden is doing something very innovative. They're able to put a lot more rubber to the road. And that's, I think, where, you kind of got to bet on big companies in some
Yeah.
of this, in some of the early part of sort of proliferation here.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. Just thinking through it even more. Wow.
Yeah,
I think like, yeah, I think over the next like couple of years, it's just going to be such a dramatic shift, and just again like lowering the barrier to entry for startups, like people
yeah,
being able to start like companies so much more easily. And I think like from a fundraising perspective, I suppose it would be primarily on increasing the investment would go towards primarily like hiring and scaling go to market teams,
yeah.
customer success.
AWS. We're
Okay,
all paying
yeah,
our AWS bills, right? Whatever your cloud compute bills are, things like that. Yeah. You can. It's been true, really, for probably the last 10 years or so, that it's been a lot easier to start a startup because you used to need servers, right? So we used to have infrastructure. If you look back, in the aughts, we kind of all needed to create our own infrastructure. We started with some of the proliferation of like bare metal server companies. We
yeah,
started buying, server capacity, but it's really been with virtualization and with cloud that the barrier really lowered, where you could just, essentially write a check to AWS every month, rather than having that infrastructure
yeah.
team. And now, yeah, I mean, you'll need software designers, but I think a lot less on the implementation side for
So
sure.
like let's say from like an employment perspective, like big companies, startups, like from a balance perspective in terms of the size of teams of engineers to the size of go to market teams to G&A, Like,
Right.
how do you think that that's gonna shift? Do we feel like, okay, there's gonna be a more dramatic shift in like technical talent, or a more dramatic shift in the amount of go-to-market team members we have, or like how is like the overall percentages, if you will, of different specializations within companies? How do you feel like that's gonna evolve? Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think it's just we're gonna have fewer and more senior people. I think
Across the
is I
board,
think
like,
I think we're gonna see a real bifurcation. We've been talking about sort of entry-level jobs. It's been a topic throughout the pandemic, right, as well, because we've been saying, what do you do if you have an engineer straight out of school who's never worked on a team before, or only barely, maybe had a month or two of internship? You really would want that person to be in the office. Does their development get delayed? And the reality with a lot of sort of where generative AI is going is a lot of that work is going to be automated away. So how do you get from being, coming straight out of school, being a junior person in kind of your first real job, to being senior enough to be able to design systems? You're sort of missing that 5-10 years of experience to get, to that level. So I think part of this transformation is we've really got to think through how we somehow maintain the core of the team, refresh the core of the team, when there's going to be that gap in the middle in experience. We've talked about it long term. It probably means that there's this bifurcation where you've got an economy that's a lot of senior jobs and a lot of junior jobs, or service jobs, and not a heck of a lot in the middle. That reality is there. I think it's on a lot of us to design career paths that sort of help people navigate that and navigate the missing middle. And it's probably not great, career perspective wise for middle managers for the next 20 years. We've been thinking about a lot. If you look at where we've steered Movo, we are aiming 100% at frontline workforce, because those are the jobs that, they're out in the field, they're technical, they require a really robust skill set, whether it's nursing or field engineers and technicians, robotics technicians, clean tech folks. Those are the kinds of jobs that aren't going to be automated away as quickly. But if you look at, the more traditional office role, I think that's the big disruption that's coming.
right. Well, speaking of, let's just shifting gears a little bit to regulation. Most of what I've seen in terms of regulation is based on removing bias and making sure that there's equitable, from an employment perspective, right?
Right.
Making sure that these systems are equitable. What I'm curious is the role regulation is going to play in slowing down AI efficiencies, so that our economies, the global economy, has the ability to transition employment. Because if it moves too fast, don't we run the risk of quickly increasing unemployment rates, potentially? I'm wondering, like, it, my thought process is like, there's going to come a point in time, maybe, I don't know, in the next 5 years, 10 years, where there's the potential for skyrocketing unemployment rates. And I could see like Congress and world leaders like rushing in to set certain regulations on AI to maintain employment statuses. Or, I mean, maybe it's just a matter of
Right.
looking at social safety nets, or I don't know, but like from a regulation perspective, from that standpoint, like I'm curious on how that's going to impact employment, right?
Yeah, totally. Our track record on regulation in terms of tech advancement has never been great. Excuse me. I think it's a short-term fix, but I think I would have a couple of immediate policy recommendations. And I think it's more in the direction of, you can kind of look at where the economy is underserved, and this is, again, not by accident. We're steering our company in that direction because we really see the greatest need over the next 10 years. But if you look at what like Bureau of Labor Statistics and the US government is saying, it's definitely sort of the clean tech, frontline healthcare work, energy transformation kinds of roles. Even robotics technicians are extremely sort of under-resourced in our country. And then for all the disruption that there is in secondary education, we're extremely understaffed as a country in essentially adjunct professors who are providing instruction at nursing schools, at technical colleges. So I think there's a real home for labor to go. It's not sort of what a lot of us are telling our kids. And, if we've been steering our kids to computer science or, liberal arts and more kind of traditional career paths of the last 20 years, this is a little bit more maybe immediately pragmatic, but I think we've got, at least if you look at statistics that our government's putting out, we've got a good 10 years of solid job growth there ahead of us. And, I think we should, not only be directing people leaving school there, but we should be doing a lot of retraining to redeploy people into those professions. They're great professions, you earn six figures and, at most a 4-year degree for most of those professions is required. A lot of them just a 2-year degree. It's a great part of our economy, and as I said, it'll be some of the last places that will be automated away, with sort of the kind of AI that's coming in this wave.
Yeah. Well, it's all very interesting and exciting, and we're coming up on time here. So I think this is probably a good time to wrap things up. But from the beginning to end, this has been a very intriguing conversation, Jason. As usual, I usually like last time I forgot that we're even recording. So this was a lot of fun. For sure. So, hey, Jason, thank you for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to doing round 3 one of these days.
Same here. Thanks again, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, and for everybody tuning in, we have a really exciting episode coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure the release date, but we're going to be having the founder CEO of Greenhouse, the applicant tracking system, coming on the show. So make sure to be checking in on that. I think we're hitting record on the 30th. So probably the following week is when we're going to be releasing that episode, but I'm really, really looking forward to it. His name's Daniel Chait. He recently came out with a book called Talent Makers. He and the other co-founder came out with a book. So we're going to be reviewing that. And there's a lot of really good insight to help you shift your talent strategy and go from chaotic hiring to strategic hiring. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you can join us then. And we will talk to you real soon. Take care.